What about, all right, so in the last little bit we have here, reggae, yay or nay? You know, you said specifically you wanted to talk about why I'm a reggae head. So what do you think?
I'm very pro reggae. I'm very pro reggae, and I've heard you sort of like in passing, either on this show or on the Majority Report, mention acts like Chronics and that sort of thing. And it's not often you run into somebody who's super passionate about reggae and reggae specifically. So I was wondering how how deep you are into the genre, how much you follow it, because I mean, even I myself, I like it, but there's a lot of old school and roots reggae acts that I'm not that into, or not that I don't like them, but I haven't really dove in that deeply into a lot of the classic records. For the most part, I'm very much into dub reggae, Lee Scratch Perry and the Upsetters and Scientists, but mostly because I'm a bit of a production nut, and I like the effects, and I like the kind of crazy sort of like studio trickery that typically goes on a dub reggae record. It just kind of really interests me, and I think all that stuff is really neat. But generally, where do your ears take you in the genre, and what are some of your favorite artists?
Well, real quick, what's your favorite dub record for people to get into dub?
I would say any number of King Tubby records are fantastic. Any number of Scientist albums are fantastic, but probably like the primo like starter dub reggae record would maybe be Super Ape with the Upsetters and Lee Scratch Perry. Like that's a pretty primo starter dub reggae record.
That's awesome. All right. So like, I mean, like, I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously I definitely grew up listening to Bob Marley, and then where it kind of diverged, which, it's funny to say this because I feel like this is still very accessible too, but I did start listening to Jimmy Cliff. And that was probably my first kind of like idea that there was somebody besides Bob Marley that did reggae. And also I think it was significant, that Jimmy Cliff actually kind of was bigger first and was political, but it wasn't, especially the Harder They Come soundtrack was not reggae. It was actually almost, you could see it in some ways kind of like a precursor to dancehall, at least as I read it. I'm definitely not an expert in this stuff.
Yeah, from what I understand, at the very root of all of it, it was ska, then came reggae, and then dancehall was sort of born out of all of that.
Well, they're music-wise, but I'm talking like thematically. Like Harder They Come is about a guy who goes on a crime spree. And it's about like, it is very political because it's definitely about class division in Jamaica, but it's not, there's no Haile Selassie, there's no Ethiopia, there's no political tenor. It's, I've been oppressed and I'm going to go steal cars and have an adventure. And it also actually correlates with another thing that definitely influenced a lot of like Jamaican politics and pop culture, which is like a love of Western movies, which in this book that I always recommend to everybody, it's called Born Fi Dead, which is about the history of the Shower Posse. And we've done a couple of illicit histories on this. But, then when much later on, I mean, I did start to listen as an example to like Buju Banton, right? That's a really important bridge. And then Garnet Silk is somebody,
and admittedly, that stuff is totally over my head. But go on.
I love Garnet Silk. So Garnet Silk, I think, was the first artist I listened to that was a non-Bob Marley artist that was like, this guy's incredible. It was actually in the 80s and early 90s, so he did kind of, again, was at that bridge of the sounds were changing, although his lyrics are still very kind of like Rastafarian lyrics. And then, I love, like, one of my favorite artists, like, I love Chronix, I love Coffee, I think she's amazing. And the fact that she's only 19 years old is crazy in terms of her kind of like vision and poise as an artist. I think that, but I also love Movado and I enjoy Vibes Cartel. I think the other thing that caught me when I started to sort of, upgrade, because there was a while where it was like, I was kind of aware of what was happening in dancehall and I would listen to various tracks, but not that closely. And I think what caught me about Chronix was it was just interesting when he got big in like 2014, 15, and 16 was like this broader kind of shift that for the first time in a long time, at least, again, I could be definitely corrected by plenty of people I'm sure who know better than me, but it seemed like, all of a sudden, this kind of roots thing is relevant again, after like just a total dominance. And dancehall I love dancehall. I'm not doing like a fake contrast here. And obviously it was always there, and there was plenty of artists that worked in between. But it did seem like, okay, here's somebody who is going to become one of the biggest pop stars in the world coming out of Jamaica, who's like clearly in that, you know, conscious, I don't really like that word, but definitely in that lane. And also, like, you know, the stuff that he was saying about Obama and everything. I mean, he caused a lot of controversies in Jamaica. And so, I think right now between Mavado, who I think consistently puts out, I really like Mavado, Vibes Cartel, I don't know how you're able to produce that amount of music while you're in prison with that production quality. That's kind of amazing. But it is interesting to me that between, you know, Chronix and Jesse Royal and Coffee and Protege and, you know, all of it, John 9, that whole sort of like roots thing is back, but like of this time is very interesting to me as a trend. And I like listening to all of it.
Yeah, I will say there was definitely a period where reggae did go through, and I think dancehall is still very much in the middle of it, this pop phase where you do have a majority of the artists chasing after whatever the most popular form is, merely because it's just so marketable. And it's, you know, if you're good at it and you end up sort of succeeding, it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Right.
But once that tide ends up coming in, you do end up seeing like a resurgence of artists kind of returning to, you know, some of the more socially conscious, again, we'll use that, forms of the genre, because again, it becomes more about sort of the people making it than the people consuming it, you know, which in a lot of respects is what happens to a lot of genres when they sort of hit that apex of pop appeal.
You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.